The morning after Easter, I stood in the center of my parents' living room, the same room where just 24 hours earlier my 7-year-old daughter had sat in the corner, perfectly still, watching her cousin's tear open box after box of gifts, while her own hands stayed empty. She hadn't cried. She had just looked up at me with those big quiet eyes and whispered 4 words that will live in my chest forever. Mommy, did I disappoint them? I didn't answer her that night, but the next morning I answered for both of us. And when I was done, my family's carefully constructed world, 30 years of secrets, favoritism, and financial manipulation came apart at the seams. Not because I screamed, not because I begged, but because I had finally quietly done the math, and I was ready to collect. My name is Caroline Ashford. I am 41 years old. I am an accountant, a mother, and until this past April, I was the most exploited person in my entire family. This is the story of how I stopped being useful and started being free. I grew up in Ridgemont, Ohio, the second of 2 daughters born to Gerald and Patricia Ashford. My older sister, Bethany, was everything my parents wanted in a child. She was loud, charming, and effortlessly beautiful in the way that made strangers stop and smile at her. She had a magnetic quality, the kind that made you forgive her before she'd even done anything wrong. I was the other one. I wasn't ugly. I wasn't invisible, but I was useful. That was the word my mother used about me, and she meant it as a compliment. Caroline is our practical one, she'd say at dinner parties while Bethany sparkled across the table. She's so grounded, so dependable. I learned early that being dependable was how I earned my place in the family, while Bethany got praised for existing. I praised for performing, so I performed. I got a full scholarship to Ohio State. I graduated with honors in accounting and finance. I started my own small firm at 28. By 35, I was managing the books for 11 small businesses, 2 nonprofits, and, yes, my own family's investment portfolio. For free. Let me say that again. I managed my parents' financial accounts, organized their taxes, restructured 2 bad investments that would have cost them nearly $40,000, and helped them navigate an estate planning process that saved them over $60,000 in projected taxes. For free, and I never complained, because I was the reliable one, the practical one, the one who didn't need the extra magic. That's actually a direct quote from my mother, something she said to my face on Easter Sunday. And it is the sentence that ended 35 years of my silence. Let me set the scene. My parents' home in Ridgemont is a large, beautifully maintained colonial half-acre lot. They have a chandelier in the entryway and a Persian rug in the living room that cost more than my first car. They are not struggling. They are comfortable, significantly, quietly, deliberately comfortable. Every year, Easter at the Ashford house was an event. My mother decorated for 3 days in advance. There were flower arrangements, a catered brunch, and a formal egg hunt in the backyard with actual prizes hidden inside the plastic eggs. Bethany's children, her 3 kids, ages 4, 6, and 9, were always the stars. They arrived in coordinated outfits, and the gifts my parents prepared for them were, without exception, extravagant. This year was no different. When I arrived with my daughter, Rosie, 7 years old, missing her 2 front teeth, wearing the yellow Easter dress she had picked out herself at Target, I noticed immediately that something felt off. That the table near the fireplace was stacked high with beautifully wrapped presents. I counted them quickly. My eyes moved over the tags. Every tag read to Caleb, to Jenna, to Miles. Bethany's kids. There was nothing for Rosie. I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe the gifts were in another room. Maybe my mother had set Rosie's aside to give privately. I smiled and I poured myself coffee and I watched Rosie run to her cousins and hug them, completely unaware. At 10 a.m. my mother announced it was time for the gift opening. For the next 40 minutes, I watched Bethany's children open a remote-controlled Jeep, 2 tablets in protective cases, a complete art studio set, a personalized jewelry box, 3 designer stuffed animals, and enough chocolate and candy to fill a bathtub. Rosie sat next to me on the settee the whole time. She watched with the patient, careful attention of a child who is trying very hard to understand something that doesn't make sense. She didn't ask. She didn't whine. She just waited. When the last gift was opened and the wrapping paper had been gathered up, my mother walked past us with a smile and said, "And I want you to hear this clearly." She said, "Oh, Caroline, We figured you had the practical gifts handled for Rosie. You've always been so self-sufficient. We didn't want to overdo it for her. Bethany's kids need a little extra magic. This year, you understand. She patted my hand and walked away. Rosie looked up at me. She had heard every word. I excused us to the powder room, and I sat on the closed lid of the toilet with my daughter on my lap, and I held it, together by sheer force of will. She pressed her face into my shoulder. She wasn't even crying yet. She was just very, very still. Mommy, she whispered. Did I disappoint them? Did I do something? I back and looked at her face. And something inside me, something that had been bending under pressure for 35 years, finally completely snapped. I kissed her forehead. I smoothed her hair. I said, "You're perfect, baby. Perfect. And I promise you this is the last time anyone in this family makes you feel like you are anything less." We left 20 minutes later. On the way home, I stopped at a pharmacy and bought her a coloring book set of markers. It cost me $11. She hugged it like it was treasure, and that made it so much worse. That night, after Rosie was asleep, I sat at my kitchen table with a yellow legal pad, and I started writing. I am not a dramatic person by nature. I don't post on social media. I don't make scenes. I solve problems methodically, with documentation and precision, which is exactly what I did that night. I opened my files. For the past 9 years, I had maintained my parents' financial accounts with the same professionalism I gave every other client, except my parents had never signed a formal service agreement because my father had laughed when I'd suggested one. "We're family, Caroline," he'd said. "We don't need paperwork." He was right. We didn't need paperwork. What we needed was for me to have charged them. I pulled out my standard rate schedule. At the time I began managing their accounts, my hourly rate was $85. Over the years, it had risen to $145. I applied a blended average of $110 per hour, which I considered deeply conservative. I began logging hours. Annual tax preparation and filing, 18 hours per year. Quarterly portfolio reviews, 6 hours per quarter, 24 hours per year. The 2019 investment restructuring that saved them $38,000, 47 hours. The 2021 estate planning process, 61 hours. Miscellaneous, phone calls, document requests, corrections, correspondence, averaged 8 hours per year. I worked through 2 cups of coffee and most of a sleeve of crackers. When I was done, I stared at the number. On the legal pad, 9 years, conservative, hourly rate, 0 compensation. The total came to $103,840. $103,840. That was the price of being the reliable daughter. Then I did something else. I reviewed the estate documents I had helped draft, documents I knew better than anyone because I had built them. My parents' estate was worth approximately $1.4 million. The majority of it in real estate and retirement accounts. The current plan, which I had helped structure, divided assets between Bethany and me equally. But I also knew something my parents seemed to have forgotten. I was listed as the sole financial power of attorney. If either of my parents became incapacitated, I controlled the financial decisions. Not Bethany, not a bank, me. That document had been my father's idea. He trusted me with it completely, because I was the reliable one. I wasn't planning to misuse it. That's not who I am, but I was planning to resign from it loudly in front of witnesses, and I was planning to present my invoice. I typed everything up that night, professionally formatted, itemized, accurate. I attached 9 years of supporting documentation, time logs, correspondence, records, copies of every financial document I had touched. I printed 2 copies. Then I wrote a letter. I won't read the whole thing to you, but the opening line was this: "Dear Mom and Dad, enclosed, please find an invoice for professional accounting services rendered over the past 9 years. I am also writing to formally notify you that effective immediately I am resigning as financial power of attorney and withdrawing all ongoing financial management services." I signed it. I sealed it. I set my alarm for 7 a.m. and then for the first time in a very long time, I slept deeply and without dreaming. My parents are early risers. I knew they would be home, and I knew my father would be on his second cup of coffee by 8 o'clock. I drove to Ridgemont alone. I left Rosie with my neighbor. I wore a blazer, not to impress anyone, but because armor comes in many forms and I had learned to choose mine carefully. My mother opened the door with a surprised smile. Caroline, we weren't expecting. I know, I said. I need to speak with both of you. It won't take long. My father was in the kitchen. He looked up, confused but welcoming. Everything okay, sweetheart? I set the envelope on the kitchen island. Between us, I need you to open that, I said. My mother reached for it. She pulled out the invoice first. I watched. Her face, the smile faded. What is this? She asked. It's an invoice, I said, for 9 years of professional accounting and financial management services, itemized with documentation. The total is $103,240, based on a conservative rate, significantly below my current market billing. My father stood up slowly. Caroline, this is accurate, I said. I can walk you through every line item if you'd like. There was a long silence. Then my mother set the invoice down and looked at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Something between anger and fear. We're your parents, she said. You did those things because you love us. I do love you, I said. And I also worked for you, professionally and without compensation, for nearly a decade, while you spent Easter Sunday giving Bethany's children a combined gift haul that I'm estimating at well over $2,000, and giving my daughter, your granddaughter, nothing, not one thing, not even a $5 chocolate bunny. My father's jaw tightened. We explained that. You told me Rosie didn't need extra magic. I said, she's 7 years old. She sat in your living room and watched her cousins open gifts for 40 minutes, and then she asked me if she had disappointed you. The kitchen was very quiet. I am not here to fight, I said. I am not here to shame you, even though I think what happened yesterday deserves a great deal of reflection. I'm here because I have made a decision, and you deserve to hear it from me directly. I pulled the second document from the envelope, the formal resignation letter. Effective today, I am resigning as your financial power of attorney. I am also withdrawing from all ongoing management of your accounts, tax preparation, and investment advisory services. I would recommend you hire a licensed CPA as quickly as possible. I'm happy to provide a transition summary, but I will not be continuing in this role without a formal compensated agreement. My mother's hand went to her mouth. You can't, my father started. I can, I said quietly. I have the legal right, and more importantly, the personal right. What I've given this family, I gave willingly, but what happened yesterday was not something I am willing to absorb in silence. Not for myself, and not for my daughter. I picked my bag. The invoice is not a demand for immediate payment. I said, it's a record, a documentation of what my labor was worth and what this family chose never to acknowledge. Keep it, put it in a drawer, but every time you look at it, I hope you think about what family actually means. I eyed the door. My father called my name. I turned around. He looked for the first time in my memory genuinely shaken. Not angry, not defensive. Shaken. Did we really make Rosie feel that way? He asked. Yes, I said. You did. And I left. I won't pretend that walking out of that kitchen felt like a movie moment. It didn't. My hands were trembling the whole drive home. I stopped at a red light and just sat there for an extra 30 seconds after it turned green because I couldn't quite make myself move. Change is terrifying, even when it's right. But what happened in the weeks that followed was something I hadn't fully anticipated. Within 48 hours, Bethany called me. She had apparently heard from our mother, though I have no idea what version of events was relayed. The call started tense and ended strange, because halfway through Bethany went quiet and said, did Mom really say Rosie didn't need extra magic? Word for word, I said. Another long pause. That's not right, Bethany said. And here's where I have to be honest with you because I think this is important. Bethany and I have never been close. The favoritism in our family shaped both of us in different ways. She benefited from it materially, yes, but she also grew up watching our parents use love as a transaction, and that does things to a person too. She called Rosie that same afternoon and apologized. She sent her a small gift card to a bookstore Rosie loves. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was real. 3 weeks after the confrontation, my father called me. He didn't apologize immediately. He's not built for immediate apologies. That would require a different kind of man than he is. But he asked if he could take Rosie to lunch. Just the two of them, grandfather and granddaughter, wherever she wanted to go. Rosie chose a place with a build-your-own grilled cheese bar. He took her. He let her order 3 kinds of cheese. He brought her a small bouquet of yellow tulips, her favorite color, and he told her she was his granddaughter, and he loved her, and he was sorry she had ever felt otherwise. She came home and told me very seriously. Grandpa said sorry, and he let me get a milkshake. I held it together until she went to bed. As for the invoice, my parents have not paid it, and I didn't expect them to. That was never really the point. The point was to make visible what had been invisible for 9 years. To put a number on what reliable had cost me, so that the next time someone called me practical or self-sufficient, we would both know what that word had historically meant. My mother has not called me directly since the confrontation. I think she's still sorting through her feelings, which is fine. I'm sorting through mine too. I found a new financial advisor for my own accounts, a woman I trust. For the first time in years, I am not the person managing everything for everyone else while neglecting my own ledger. It feels strange. It feels good. I want to be careful about how I end this, because I'm not interested in presenting myself as someone who has everything figured out. I don't. I'm a work in progress, like most people. But here's what I know. The most dangerous role you can play in a family is the one labeled reliable. Not because reliability is a flaw. It isn't. Being dependable, being steady, being the person others can count on. These are genuinely good things. The problem is when a family decides that one person's reliability is a resource to extract rather than a quality to respect. I spent 35 years being grateful that my family needed me. What I should have been asking was, do they value me? There's a difference. Needing someone and valuing them are not the same thing. And children, clears throat. Children, they see all of it. They absorb everything. Rosie felt the difference between herself and her cousins before she had the words to describe it. She translated it into something personal, something about her own worth. Did I disappoint them? Did I do something wrong? No child should ever have to ask that question. Not in a family, not in a home, where love is supposed to be unconditional. The morning I walked into my parents' kitchen with that envelope, I wasn't just standing up for myself. I was showing Rosie, even though she wasn't there, what it looks like to stop apologizing for your own value. I was showing her that love without accountability isn't really love. It's just habit. She doesn't know all the details. She's 7. She doesn't need to. But someday when she's grown, I want her to look back and see a mother who, when it mattered most, chose her daughter's dignity over her own comfort. I want her to know that the people who love you should show it equally, consistently, without asterisks. And if they don't, you are allowed to name it. You're allowed to stop being convenient. You're allowed to walk out of that kitchen with your head up and your invoice in your hand. So I'll leave you with this. Is there someone in your life who has been taking your reliability for granted? Someone who calls you practical or low maintenance while quietly expecting you to carry the weight they're unwilling to acknowledge? If so, what would it cost them if you stopped? And more importantly, what has it already cost you? Think about it. I'll see you in the next one. This is Valera Payback. Because justice, real justice, starts with knowing your worth.